The 1960s didn't just birth muscle cars, it summoned thunder on four wheels. Steel met fury, engines howled across America, and power was no longer polite. These weren't just cars, they were declarations of freedom, velocity, and raw, unapologetic strength. Buckle in. These are the 10 muscle machines that defined a decade and defied time. 1964 Pontiac GTO. It began here and where restraint was murdered by displacement. The 1964 Pontiac GTO wasn't merely a car, it was a cultural riot with chrome bumpers. Born from rebellion within General Motors' own walls, the GTO defied corporate policy, slipped through loopholes, and landed on the streets like a clenched fist in motion. Under the hood, a 389 cubic inch V8 tuned to rumble like distant artillery. With tri-power carburetors and 348 horses waiting to charge, the GTO turned stoplights into battlegrounds. It wasn't delicate, it was decisive. A 4-speed stick, optional Hurst shifter, and a 0 to 60 time that felt like an adrenaline overdose gave teenage hands the power of a sledgehammer. The body? Simple, straight lines. But it wasn't about beauty. It was about presence. It stood in parking lots like a coiled beast, and when it moved, it announced itself with thunder. Car magazines didn't whisper, they screamed. Supercar, they called it, birthing a whole new vocabulary of velocity. The GTO didn't just launch a car class, it rewrote America's automotive DNA. Every muscle car that followed, from Dodge to Ford, owes it a growl, a glance, a gesture of respect. It was built in defiance, driven in fury, and remembered in legend. The GTO was the first shot in a war that would rage for a decade, and no one saw it coming. 1969 Dodge Charger RT. It was shaped like defiance and sounded like chaos. The 1969 Dodge Charger RT wasn't built to cruise. It was built to chase, roar, and own every inch of American blacktop. If the GTO was the birth, the Charger was the brawl that followed. Under the skin, a 440 Magnum 5.8, 375 horses of bad intention. Or, if you dared, the legendary 426 Hemi, an engine so brutal it wasn't just banned from NASCAR, it was feared. Every piston stroke felt like a declaration of dominance. Its body wasn't subtle. The split grille, Coke bottle hips, and recessed rear window gave it a shape that felt like muscle with grace, a predator in a tuxedo. But grace ended the moment you turned the key. That engine note didn't purr. It announced itself with a primal snarl, daring you to test its limits. Inside you sat low, cocooned in vinyl, gripping a wheel that felt like a weapon. Every corner asked you a question. The Charger answered with torque, and on screen it became immortal. Bullet. The Dukes of Hazzard. But those weren't performances. They were confirmations. This wasn't a car, it was a legend in motion. The 1969 Charger RT was brute force wearing charm, elegance carved from aggression. It didn't beg to be remembered, it demanded it, with rubber scars on the pavement and thunder still echoing. Third, 1967, Chevrolet Camaro Z/28. It wasn't the biggest or the loudest, but it was the sharpest blade in Chevrolet's box. The 1967 Camaro Z/28 wasn't made for posing at diners. It was forged for SCCA battlefields, born to eat apexes and haunt stopwatches. Chevy didn't just want a muscle car, they wanted a scalpel that could cut Ford's Mustang to pieces, and they got it. The Z28 came with a high-revving 302 small block V8, created by marrying a 283 crank with a 327 block. It wasn't brute strength, it was controlled madness. 290 horses on paper, but far more in spirit. It begged to be revved, teased, tamed. At 7,000 RPM, it didn't whimper. It wailed. The Muncie 4-speed power disc brakes and stiffer suspension made every corner feel like choreography. No float, no fade. Just grip, grind, and go. The exterior? Purpose wrapped in style, dual stripes, cowl induction hood, a profile like a bullet in waiting. It didn't need wings or flares to prove anything, it just showed up, stripped down and serious. The Z/28 wasn't a car for everyone. It was a machine for drivers who listened to tachometers like symphonies and took corners like commandments. It wasn't made to cruise, it was made to conquer. This was the Camaro, not for showboats, but for warriors. Fourth, 1968 Ford Mustang 428 Cobra Jet. By 1968, the Mustang had already become a pop culture icon. But Ford wasn't satisfied with fame, they wanted fear. So they gave the Mustang fangs and called it the 428 Cobra Jet. This wasn't just a larger engine, it was a declaration of war. Ford took the conservative 390 and tossed it aside, slotting in a 428 cubic inch monster borrowed from police interceptors. With ram air induction, heavy-duty internals, and underrated at 335 horsepower, the Cobra Jet was a lie on paper and a storm on asphalt. Floor it, and the rear tires begged for mercy. The quarter mile? Gone in the blink of a taillight. This wasn't finesse, as it was fury, AM. Mustang that didn't just gallop, but charged like a juggernaut. Its shape remained familiar, the fastback curves, the pony badge, the quiet confidence. But under the hood, it was a different animal. The Cobra Jet didn't care about civility, it cared about domination. Drag strips took notice, competitors winced, and suddenly, the Mustang wasn't just the car you wanted, it was the car you feared showing up next to. The Cobra Jet turned the Mustang from sweetheart to street slayer. It didn't just run with the pack as it hunted them. Fifth, 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner 446 barrel. This wasn't sophistication, it was strategy. The 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner 446 barrel didn't care about luxury, badges, or chrome-laced vanity. It was raw, loud, and born to embarrass more expensive machines. Named after a cartoon bird and equipped with an actual beep-beep horn, the Roadrunner seemed like a joke. But when Plymouth dropped in the 440 cubic inch V8 with 3 two-barrel carburetors, the joke ended. It made 390 horsepower of unfiltered rage. It didn't whisper, it barked. 3 stomps on the throttle and the secondaries screamed awake. The quarter mile vanished in 13 seconds flat. And for under $3,500, it was the bargain of the century. No frills, bench seats, rubber mats, steel wheels. This wasn't built for showroom polish. It was built for street justice. Every inch of it screamed purpose. Every dent earned respect. It wasn't pretty. It didn't try to be. And yet, in that stripped-down shell lived something pure. A philosophy. A rebellion against bloat. The 6-barrel wasn't for collectors, it was for warriors. On drag strips and back roads, it made its case, loudly, violently, and undeniably. The Roadrunner didn't chase competition. It left it behind in a cloud of smoke and laughter. 1966 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 396. It wore no crown, but it ruled with iron fists. The 1966 Chevelle SS 396 wasn't elegant. It didn't need to be. It was the steel-boned enforcer of Chevrolet's muscle era, the car that meant business long before you turned the key. Under its long, flat hood lived a beast, the 396 cubic inch big block V8. It snarled out up to 375 horsepower depending on how brave you were. But it wasn't just about power. It was about presence. You felt it in your chest, not just your hands. That deep burble at idle, a war drum with a heartbeat. It wasn't flashy. The styling was restrained, the squared-off fenders, clean lines, a bulging hood that hinted at menace beneath. It looked like a father's car, until it didn't. One pull of the shifter, one stomp on the throttle, and the Chevelle shed its polite skin. Torque flowed like floodwater. Acceleration came without apology. The SS 396 could cruise Main Street or annihilate quarter miles without breaking a sweat. And in that moment, in that roar, it became something more. A car that stood not just for speed, but for muscle done right. No gimmicks, no flair, just iron, oil, and purpose. 1969 AMC AMX 390. It came from the underdog, the outsider brand that wasn't supposed to compete. But the 1969 AMC AMX 390 didn't just compete, it struck like a fist from the shadows, swift and brutal. AMC wasn't known for muscle, but in the AMX they crammed heart, guts, and an unwillingness to surrender. A two-seater coupe with short wheelbase and long attitude, the AMX felt more like a middleweight brawler than a heavyweight slugger, lean, fast, and shockingly agile. Beneath its fiberglass hood, a 390 cubic inch V8 pulsed with 315 horsepower and 425 pound-feet of torque, numbers that felt modest until you saw what it did with them. It weighed less than most muscle cars, and that meant one thing: it moved. The interior was tight, wrapped around the driver like a cockpit. Every dial pointed at war. No fluff, no frills, just the essentials to keep you glued to the machine. And the styling? Underrated. Flared fenders, fast backflow. A presence that caught your eye in silence, then shattered that silence at 5,000 RPM. It didn't sell like Mustangs. It didn't win popularity contests. But to those who knew, the AMX was a weapon. An unlikely hero that ran with giants and sometimes outran them. 8th, 1967 Plymouth GTX Hemi. It wasn't here to make friends. The 1967 Plymouth GTX was born of fury, an ironclad messenger carrying one brutal truth: power needs no permission. With the 426 Hemi ticking beneath its sculpted skin, the GTX didn't whisper promises. It delivered threats. The Hemi, already feared on the drag strip, now had a new home in a grand touring body. 425 horsepower, solid lifters, dual four-barrel carbs. It didn't idle. It rumbled like a god clearing its throat. And yet, this wasn't some bare-bones racer. The GTX had class, bucket seats, wood grain trim, a civilized interior. If you ignored the thunder outside, its looks, muscle in a suit, chrome brightwork along razor-straight lines, a hood bulge that declared intent. It wasn't loud in styling, it was loud. In performance, every time you floored it, you weren't just accelerating, you were launching. It pinned your spine to the seat and didn't apologize. The torque came on hard, the tires begged for grip, and suddenly, the world blurred. The GTX with a Hemi was rare, expensive, dangerous. But those who bought it didn't care about gas mileage or mass appeal. They cared about domination. It was the gentleman's bruiser, a muscle car in a dinner jacket, ready to tear the night apart. 9. 1965 Buick Grand Sport. The gentleman's muscle. The 1965 Buick Grand Sport didn't scream. It didn't strut. It whispered confidence, knowing full well what it was hiding under that sculpted hood. While others bragged, the GS arrived in silence with 401 cubic inches of nailhead V8 packed into a mid-size frame. Buick claimed 325 horsepower, but insiders knew better. This engine, often referred to as the Wildcat 445 for its torque output, had a punch far bigger than the numbers suggested. It wasn't just about speed, it was about smoothness. Acceleration felt like silk-wrapped violence, sudden, effortless, refined. This was a machine built for those who wanted muscle without the rough edges. Its styling? Conservative elegance, subtle badging, just enough chrome. But look closer and the stance told another story. Lowered, balanced, coiled like a predator waiting for a signal. Inside, the GS was upscale, cloth and vinyl, not rubber mats. An interior that invited, not intimidated. But once in motion, refinement gave way to force. The Buick GS wasn't for show-offs, it was for sleepers. The kind of car that passed you in silence, until it didn't. It reminded the world that luxury and muscle weren't enemies. Sometimes they shared a bloodline. 10th. 1969 Chevrolet Nova SS 396. The street never saw it coming. The 1969 Chevy Nova SS 396 was proof that the meanest things sometimes wore the plainest faces. This wasn't a flashy car, no oversized wings, no dramatic flares, just a compact body, unassuming lines, and the beating heart of a monster. Under the hood, 396 cubic inches of fury, pumping out up to 375 horsepower. It was like cramming a lion into a lunchbox. Tight, tense, and terrifying. Lightweight and brutally fast, the Nova didn't dance. It punched, hard. 0 to 60 came in under 6 seconds. And with the right gears, it ate quarter miles like breakfast. The steering was heavy, the ride was firm, but none of that mattered. You weren't here for comfort. You were here for chaos. The SS badge sat quietly on the grille, a whisper of warning. Most didn't listen. Most learned the hard way. The Nova SS was the blue-collar brawler, not born to impress, but to annihilate. No gimmicks, just a big block in a small suit with revenge in its veins. These weren't just cars. They were thunder trapped in steel, built in a golden era when power roared louder than politics. The 1960s gave us legends on wheels, and these 10 muscle machines left rubber, smoke, and stories in their wake. May their engines never fall silent.